School System, the organizer of School of Tomorrow events, I'd like to welcome you to A World of Tomorrow, Negotiating a Better Future, the 11th edition of SOT events and the first one that is fully virtual, hence covers audiences from all around the world. The non-profit SOT event series was launched by Beacon House in 2000 as part of its CSR. And it was also launched to help give direction to the organization so they can make informed decisions. At the same time, engaging global communities in discourse to see how the future of schools and societies can be modified and altered to meet the new requirements. I am Amber Noor Mustafa, the host for the workshop Strategies for Teaching and Collaborating in the Virtual World. A proud former student of Beacon House, I'm currently serving as the Regional Senior Manager of Professional Development at Beacon House School System. I've been associated with academia for the past 18 years, and I've been recently awarded the Fulbright PhD scholarship, and I plan to start my doctoral research at the Florida State University this fall. Ladies and gentlemen, it is indeed my honor and privilege to introduce Ms. Jill Ackers Clayton, the workshop facilitator, to you. Ms. Jill Ackers' experience and expertise include innovative learning environments, learning space design, project-based learning and training with faculty, and instructional coaching with all levels of leadership. She is also the author of Developing Natural Curiosity Through Project-Based Learning, 5 Strategies for the Pre-K to 3 Classroom. It is 5:45 where she is at the moment, and she's been up almost all night preparing her learning space for us, and that speaks volume about her passion for what she does. Ms. Jill, it is truly an honor to have you. We are very grateful. No doubt the coronavirus situation brought physical presence in schools to a sudden halt. But to be very honest, that does not necessarily have to have a negative impact on learning in the long run. As teachers in schools almost immediately overnight learned new ways to ensure uninterrupted learning, and it seems improbable that we would ever go back to the old normal. In this new scenario, teachers around the globe are keen to know how we will shift the curriculum which was originally designed for in-person instruction for virtual learning. How will we adapt to online platforms for demonstrations of learning and for assessments? How will we as teachers find the time and the space to effectively collaborate with professionals in a virtual environment? And finally, how do we get children to collaborate in this virtual classroom? Ms. Jill Ackers believes that unprecedented learning environments require us to access new learning opportunities and adjust to changing role expectations, and this is what she will be catering to in the workshop today. Dear audience, you may ask questions throughout the session using the question function on the SOT website, live.sotevents.com, and they will be addressed at the end of the session. Over to you, Jill.
Thank you so much, Amber, and congratulations on such a wonderful and distinguished accomplishment. I look forward to coming to visit you in Florida, and it's an honor. This will be my 3rd year working with Beacon House Schools, and so thank you for having me to share these strategies that we've been actively working on. And right now, what I'm going to do is share my screen, and we have approximately 100 of our participants engaged in an online experience while we are also engaged in our online conversation and dialogue today. So you should be able to see on the screen now what we call Miro. And our Miro board is a strategy that we use for online interactive collaboration. And so really thinking about what does it mean to be an active learner, an active participant online, and start to really engage ourselves and our learners in the work that we're doing. So our 3 goals for today are creating learning environments around sensory cognition, to really promote content accessibility. And then how do we design instruction so learners are the producers who truly demonstrate agency over their own learning process? And then we're going to look at what does it mean to facilitate micro interactions to promote authentic collaborative groupings. And those are really what we're going to dive into today. And what's nice is our participants
really promote content accessibility. And then we're going to look at what does it mean to facilitate minor interactions to promote authentic.
Is anyone else hearing the background?
And what's nice is our participants really
All right.
There seems to be an echo, Jill.
Absolutely. Let's see if we can try that one more time. All right. Well, if not, we will just know that. Can you see our screen now?
Yes, your screen is visible.
Okay, excellent. Well, let's go back to our 3. It sounds like someone might have in the background a TV on. So if you're in the Miro board, could you put your screen on mute? That would be helpful for the rest of us.
I am.
All right, so we're going to move forward. Thank you. So in a Miro board, this is actually an interactive way to create an online learning environment where all users are part of the process. And so what we'd like to think about today is, for those of you who are listening in and not in the Miro board, we'd love for you to send in to Amber what went well for you this spring in distance learning. What needs improvement? And what do you think our next steps are? We'd love to hear from you. And then Amber's going to share out some of those comments that you make, as well as why we look at them on our Miro board as well. So things that have gone well: delivering concepts, amazing opportunities, and so many competitions, so many enjoyed online classes, the use of AV aids, virtual learning provides opportunities more efficiently in science, observing teachers and students through a common platform, availability. These are excellent. Some things for improvement. Want to work more on myself for more effective approaches to create an environment of a real class, assessments, well-being. The syllabus should be rescheduled as it's putting burdens on parents. Absolutely. We've been hearing a lot of that from around the world. Through Fielding International, I work globally with schools. We're in Russia, we are in Barcelona, Thailand, Singapore. And so we're consistently hearing, how can we support the environment at home to ensure that our students are accessing the content in a way that is successful for everybody? And what are some of our next steps? Creating animations to deliver concepts more effectively, to provide training and exposure to administrators for teachers on digital tools. And I love how right now, even on what we're doing, we're watching the interaction and people adding in what their thoughts are in an interactive way. Amber, do you have some statements that you want to share from our participants who are listening in?
Yes, I have not received any as yet, so okay. I will share them with you as soon as I do.
Okay, not a problem. So if we think about the very first strategy, creating learning environments around sensory cognition. If we look at this picture, we think about our classrooms, our built environment. knowing that our built environment truly shapes who we are, both socially and cognitively. The design of our physical environment informs how we construct and make meaning of new information. That includes both content-wise as well as socially. How do we interact with others? And if we look at this picture and we think back to our built environment, our classrooms, as teachers, we're really intentional and we're really explicit about how we design our learning spaces. This is a learning community in Cranston, Rhode Island in the United States. And this learning community is intentional with visual cues, with the way that students are grouped together. There are high tables, there are low tables, there's soft furniture. These students are engaged in a project-based learning unit around sustainability. This is a multi-age learning community of 3rd through 5th grade. And so the intentionality that we create in our built environment also needs to be shifted into the way that we're delivering our instruction in our virtual environment. And how do our 5 senses truly interact the ways that we design our spaces and the ways that our students interact in these spaces? So as instructors, one thing that we really focus on in the built environment are the kinds of learning modalities and how we get kids to engage with our content. Sometimes it's independent study, sometimes it's peer-to-peer, we engage in project-based learning, we do whole group didactic instruction. But as we think about that built environment, what materials do our students utilize each time they're in that built environment? And our goal is to help students as learners in a metacognitive way, figure out how they need to set up their own learning environment for those learning modalities in their space. If you look around your space right now, what have you done to set yourself up? What are you seeing? What are you hearing? What is it smells? Who's in the house? Who's moving around your space? Do you have a notebook? Do you have multiple screens? So really thinking about how we establish the physical environment in which our students are learning virtually is a huge priority for our learners so that they know that they can access that content and that you can create opportunities and experiences for them to access that. Now, when we think about cognition, it's the mental action or process of acquiring knowledge through multiple experiences. And so when we look at these 3 pictures, what sensory stimuli do we see happening in each one of these? In the first image, we see a child on the screen, but she also has a cell phone. Is that part of a back channeling experience? Is that something that is a sensory stimuli that's possibly getting in the way? What resources does she have set up around her for success? If we look at the image in the middle, what do we see happening? So we see in the background, there's a TV on, there's food, there's comforts, there's a sibling who's learning in the same space. Is there too much sensory stimuli or not enough sensory stimuli? And then if we look at the third image, how are these students set up within their space? And what sort of processes, like we would utilize in the built environment in our class, do we have to help our students with when establishing their own built space that they're learning in at home? And many times parents are looking for support on what does it mean to set up that learning environment so that they know kids are able to receive content, able to access that in multiple ways beyond just the information and knowledge, but how do they apply that information and start to really analyze and work together? And our third strategy is really thinking about once our students have established their built environment to engage in an online, in a virtual process, what are our students producing along the way that really supports them in this process? Because those learning modalities that you're choosing, peer-to-peer, breakout rooms, asynchronous asynchronous and synchronous groups, how are our students and what are they producing that truly determines for them the relationship between memory and learning? And that's a huge key factor when it comes to students being able to make meaning of the content while they have agency within their own process. And so that really focuses on students moving away from being passive consumers online to active producers, because then they're truly demonstrating what they know and what they can do based on the content that you're providing them with. And that comes in multiple forms. Students can self-evaluate the work that they're doing. They can self-evaluate for quality, their own learning process, as well as academic achievement. They can also determine with the teacher and co-develop what learning standards or other academic requirements are they attaining at that time. And so how do we invite students into the process to produce artifacts so that we're helping them reflect on their academic goals while creating a lasting archive of work and products? So really moving towards, in an online environment, the production of portfolios, process journals. So as students go through the flow, say, of a project-based learning experience, they also have a record of their thinking and their process. What are the perspectives and the points of view that are really impacting what they're thinking about? Because physical evidence must be tangible and student generated. And that's really how we think about developing formative assessment. As we look at some of the things that our students have been doing around the globe, and even my own students, they spent a lot of time doing worksheets online, or we call them screen sheets. And it was very much, this is what I'm doing in relation to the content. Not a lot of focus being placed on how they're doing it, how they're establishing the process by which they're becoming agentic learners. So as we think about this strategy, it's really about agentic production. How are our students producing something that will be lasting beyond just the computer screen, or hitting submit and uploading an assignment? Because really, as our students make meaning through the world around them, their built environment at home, their built virtual environment online, we have to allow them to produce so they understand why and how this learning is relevant and authentic, because that's truly what lifts the complexity out of the content that you're providing those opportunities for. And as we think about that, what are some of the ways, and I would love for you to join in and share your thoughts and questions. And if you're actively working on the Miro board, please use a Post-it note and deliver your answers by placing them on the different questions. But what feedback did you receive from peers and students about the work that you've done? What changes would you make to student work next year? And what are some of the ways that you challenged your students and really drove them towards production? And what are the ways that you assessed their production of work and process online? So Amber, if you have questions as folks are sharing through this process, please feel free to share those with us as well.
Yes. Can you hear me? Yeah. So Jill, there is a question about the tool that you are using actually. So while, there are other questions about the content, but there is, a lot of interest in the Miro board that you are using. So would you like to, shed some light on its usefulness in virtual learning?
Absolutely. So in hosting virtual learning experiences for adults and for students as young as kindergarten, Miro is an interactive tool that allows all of a group to work together in an environment where we can see each other and we can see each other produce items, we can reflect together. So Miro's interactive capability allows an online virtual culture focused on the production and the thinking around the lesson or the unit or the piece of content or objective that you're really focused on. The Miro board also allows students to move into breakout spaces within the board. So we can do small group interactions where, as the instructor, I can move through different breakout rooms and the Miro board to watch the production, to be able to know when I might need to assist students if there's minor misconceptions within that content they're trying to attain. It also allows students an interactive way to share their thinking and utilize tools and templates that help process their thinking. And so that interactive and connectivity changes their, which is really about this second strategy, changes them from a consumer and a passive participant to a really active participant who's producing and thinking together with others during the learning process. So when we think about changing the medium of our curriculum and moving away from here's a learning target that we're focused on and I'm in front of those, we don't have to change the learning targets that we've established. What we have to do is understand that the levels of interactions need to be set up by us as the educators through different learning modalities. And Miro helps support those learning modalities by shifting from the delivery of content to the process of thinking and actions that students would take. So it actually puts them at the center of the learning process versus in just a visual Zoom experience or Google Hangout. It's more of just a dialogue. And this truly puts them at the center of the process. And that's how I think that Miro really assists students within that learning process.
Thank you so much, Jill. I will keep asking you questions. Please feel free to go ahead with the presentation.
Okay, great. So when we think about the different strategies that we've talked about, we've had, we're thinking about creating learning environments around sensory cognition. So moving from the built physical environment, that first strategy is students have to really become metacognitive around the kind of built environment they're creating for themselves in a virtual experience and setting themselves up, because that promotes content accessibility. And that second strategy is making sure that students can produce and become active producers of content throughout the learning process, because we know that that's what shifts them to the center of that learning process. And so our third strategy that's a priority before we choose the tools that we're going to use, whether it be Miro or Mural or Google Hangouts or Seesaw or any of the other phenomenal apps that are available, we have to look at the micro interactions that keep students engaged throughout the virtual process. So when we go back to these learning modalities, as teachers, when we're using these different modalities, we have to be able to embed collaborative interactions that are relevant to students. Because it doesn't matter if we've chosen the very best lesson and thinking that we've designed it. If our students are back on their phone and they're not engaged or they're not showing up, we're not designing enough interaction into the process for our students. So we have to go through really intentional shifts to help facilitate that collaboration, to help facilitate the culture of collaboration through the variety of learning modalities that we choose. And so that means high quality online instruction has to provide students with a variety of learning modalities and a minimum of 4 to 5 interactions per 50 minutes for students to produce around the thinking that they're doing. And so how are we looking at these interactions within the work that we've created? And I don't know about you guys, but I'm wondering, have you ever been in a meeting where you can see some people's faces, you can see half, there's noise in the background, some people don't have their videos on, they're back channeling, some people are looking down at their phone the whole time, and it doesn't feel like a process that is engaging everybody in the space. And so micro interactions, the way that we provide collaborative interactions embedded throughout any online virtual experience, utilizing these different learning modalities, is a priority to keep engagement in your students. And that begins also by setting norms around what each one of these modalities looks like. So in a peer-to-peer interaction, we typically, and even as adults in our own experience, all right, we've got breakout rooms. Let's send everybody to a breakout room. But without norms around what does it mean to interact with other students to facilitate that process, people go into that with a variety of expectations and things that they're working on that tend to be different than the expectations and the outcomes that the teacher has set for that space. So without establishing these key norms, it's really challenging to think about that moment where your students have lost attention or they're not paying attention. And that begins by creating norms for what the interaction means. And through each one of those, there has to be products, artifacts that your students are creating at the same time. So again, using a tool that's interactive, like the Miro board, allows you as the teacher to capture that thinking because you've chosen the appropriate learning modalities, as well as developed a set of norms for how students interact within that virtual space. So it doesn't matter the goals or the tools that you've set up front. If you don't invite students and learners into the process frequently, allow them to take risks, allow them to move things around the screen and not worry about it, then we're inviting students into that learning process. And it's easier for them to access the content and work in a metacognitive way so that they're building those collaborative skills. And so here again, what we want to think about is providing those collaborative opportunities where we've set norms around that collaboration. We've chosen the correct learning modalities because that ensures everyone in the space has the opportunity to participate. And there are many times that in an online virtual experience, our students don't have the opportunity or the voice to participate. So our role as facilitators is to empower all learners to make sure that they can access the content in a built environment in their own virtual space that sets them up for success. That's done through a variety of learning modalities where students are producing artifacts and that they are collaborating to make meaning out of what they're doing. And so when we do workshops, many times we'll say it's the 80-20 rule. And so how do I get my students to interact during 80% of the process while I'm facilitating and moderating 20% of the time? And really inviting and engaging in our students being able to collaborate in the world. So as you'll see, I'm moving out to find our image here. And I want to say thank you to our group here today because we have really taken our own risks and thought about how do we bring in and engage in this Miro board activity where everyone has the opportunity to move around and to interact. And can we model that in a live workshop session and take these risks together to show that online instruction is a challenging piece in the beginning. But if we invite our learners in and truly think about what does it mean to provide them with agentic experiences to ensure that their built environment is set up around sensory cognition. We've increased the right sensory stimuli and decreased that stimuli. And those are things that have to happen on a daily basis. If you're in a hybrid situation in the fall or a fully online model, or if you're at a full return model, sensory cognition and the student's ability to make meaning based on their built environment is a huge priority for our learners to be able to access content. So as we build outside spaces of our virtual environments, our micro interactions don't stop during the online experience. How do we provide opportunities and vital opportunities to shape the norms and cultures for students so that they're constantly being invited into the collaborative process? And that can be reflection, that can be all sorts of learning modalities, seminar rooms, seminar spaces within your virtual world, small group settings, whole group settings, just one-on-one technology-based activities, independent study that students then come back, those peer-to-peer interactions. And how do we use project-based learning to truly invite in that product and process balance so students have authentic challenges? They're finding their own purpose in the work that they're doing. They're researching and gathering information around your content, and we're supporting them by building out prototypes. And they're sharing those prototypes with others outside their own classroom and that virtual environment that you've created. But we're inviting in experts in other classes and other students that we know to provide feedback, as well as share other perspectives and points of view. The consequences of those actions of really developing agentic production invite students to be part of their own learning process. And then you've increased the amount of collaborative interactions throughout that process. So unlike the brick and mortar classrooms, online classrooms can feel all encompassing. So by opening and closing and having offline experiences helps expand that. And then there's really no before or after class because community is being built all the time. Because when we lack the traditional space and borders that demarcate our traditional learning experience, we're opening up the world to our students. And we're giving them the opportunity to truly be active participants in the learning process. So let's open it up for questions and answers. I'm going to go back to StreamYard and stop sharing. And Amber, if you're ready, we can take questions from our viewers.
Okay, thank you, Jill. Well, the first question, and which has actually, come again and again, is about the human contact with children, especially for new students. I mean, virtual learning, there are so many tools to get them to interact, but how do you actually create that human factor and that relationship with children when they are going to be online? And this is peer-to-peer relationship as well as the teacher-student relationship.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's a great question. And part of this is to really think about when we're inviting students to be part of their own learning process, before we can begin that, we have to develop a culture and a community set up around norms. And we're using protocols and inviting students in to share who they are, what they're about, what their passions are about. And that can't be something that stops at the very beginning or after the first time that you do it. Each virtual session has to personally invite others into the process. There's a phenomenal book by a gentleman named Peter Block who talks about the sense of belonging when it requires us to build a community. And one of his strategies is really inviting those in our small groups. And so how do we build a sense of community in multiple ways when we don't have that physical space, especially with young children in an early learning environment? How do we do that in short snippets that allows students to truly get to know each other? And that, again, comes from establishing norms, using protocols where students get to know each other. But that has to happen on a consistent basis. We can't do it just once in the beginning. It has to happen every single time we have a virtual interaction. And we have to be able to recall information. So tools like Miraboard, that you can go back and access what you've shared previously and uploaded images, who your family is, things that you are comfortable sharing. And we have to honor those equity pieces as well and make sure that we're bringing those in. Even when we have a class as short as 40 minutes. If I've only got 40 minutes, which really Amber and I only have, based on our experience, 40 minutes. It's different in an online panel like this, but with 40 minutes, I would dedicate the first 5 to 10 minutes of every session to really making sure that we're building community. So if it's that first 5 minutes and that last 5 minutes, I have 30 minutes to really embed the culture. I have 30 minutes to embed the products and the ways in which my students are going to interact. I have 30 minutes to choose those correct learning modalities, and I have 30 minutes to ensure that I've embedded those micro interactions. It may not be easy, but what happens over time is that your 40 minutes become more focused when you've developed a culture around the human element. And you're ensuring that the students have set up their built environment to support the learning and the access that they're doing virtually.
Okay, thank you so much, Jill, for answering that question. There is another question that has been asked by a number of people. That obviously we are still not over the COVID situation, and we might still have to continue with some online learning even after this summer time is over in fall 2020. So should schools modify the attainment targets and the learning outcomes to adjust to the new learning environment, the online learning, or not? So that is another question that school leaders actually have asked, from you.
Absolutely. It's a great question. And it's one that we're grappling with all over the world. My personal thought and what I would recommend to school leaders is really helping your teachers figure out what are the priorities within your content. What do you really want your students to be able to demonstrate? And what do you want them to know and do with that content? And what are the content and the standards that we can thread throughout multiple classes so that they're spiraling? So in one of the schools that I was honored to design, language arts and the reading and writing capability, not literature, but the reading and writing process was embedded into every teacher's structure. So the language arts teacher is not the only one responsible for those skills and that content. And so how do we start to embed and weave through the content that needs to be spiraled and ongoing so all teachers are part of supporting the writing process, the reading process, bringing in that. So we're not siloing our content area subjects. And that really goes back to that agentic learning and providing students agency over the products that they're creating. And so, yes, that changes the way that curriculum looks. It changes the types of learning targets that we've established over the years when we've been solely housed in a built school. And traditionally, our schools are still built in a cells and bells model, and they're siloed in certain areas. And now, because of what we're being forced to experience in these unprecedented times, it's the right time to unsilo the way that we look at education and really start to create an experience for students that's relevant to the kinds of experiences that they're going to engage in the real world. And so, yes, I think we need to really look at and encourage the way that we set up our learning targets and our outcomes for students.
Okay, thank you, Jill. So do you think that children would actually miss out on some skills when now that, if we have to modify these learning outcomes for this new environment?
Again, another great question. I always work on people not saying, yes, I do think we'll miss out on skills. The group that I work with, Fielding International, are actually designing what we call a flex model. And how do we completely reimagine the school building as a collaborative hub during this time? Because students need human-to-human contact. They need play time with their peers. We're utilizing a hybrid and an online virtual environment. And so how do we start to look at how and when is virtual the priority, because that frees us up to focus on the skills in a physical built learning environment that will support students. So we want to have both. How can we blend this environment so that students are doing independent study and small group work while other students are collaboratively working together in a physical space? And that flex environment means if we need to continue social distancing, how do we repurpose the large spaces in our current campuses, including the indoors and the outdoors, to support these connections that as humans we need? As humans, we know that that's the foundation for building that relationship. Amber, you and I have a relationship because we've worked physically together multiple times. And so for us to engage in an online learning experience is much easier because we've met and we've engaged physically and shared time putting Post-it notes and thinking through the complexity of what we're trying to do. So we're in an unprecedented situation, but that doesn't mean we can't find the benefits of this hybrid model and really turn our physical buildings into not schools, but places that are collaborative, that are partnered with our community and truly building those skill sets.
Yes, that's a very powerful comment, actually, Jill. And the fact that you mentioned earlier that, the environment of the school speaks about the kind of cognitive learning that you would like for your children. So that is a really, really powerful concept, something I just picked from your workshop just now. Now, there's another very interesting question. How can micro interactions be initiated and how do they work? So you mentioned micro interactions, and a lot of questions are coming up about that. So please explain how micro interactions with more can be utilized in a classroom with some more examples. How can they be initiated and how would they work?
Absolutely. So when we talk about micro interactions, we want to think about the small ways throughout, say, a 60-minute, or someone had posted about a 40-minute session. What are the small interactions that students need throughout that 40-minute session to make meaning of the content that you're setting up through the different learning modalities? So if I'm in a Miro board, I might say, find a peer in the Miro board, move around the board, and you have 3 minutes to answer or engage in this protocol. So that would be a micro interaction. It's something small and frequent throughout a larger or longer virtual session. Because what I've been experiencing in my observations with pre-K through 12 teachers over the last couple of months, I've been fortunate enough to be able to observe multiple classes every day. And is that teachers are coming on and they're delivering sessions where the students are passive consumers throughout the entire process, whether it's in a 10th grade AP class or a kindergarten class where the teacher introduces the whole process. They might bring in a reader who's doing a storybook, but the students aren't engaged in interactions to make meaning. And so one project that we've worked on really well, we've established in an area in New York that I work in, is students are actually facilitating those 1-hour sessions and coming up with 5 micro interactions that they would want to do with their peers. And we've actually run that project developed by our our first grade classroom all the way up through the seniors in high school. And so we're taking a minimum of 5 based on the student's design and embedding 5 micro interactions based on a variety of learning modalities. So you have to break out into peer-to-peer, you have to break out into small group. It might be a whole session, but it could be run by a student or a group of students. So really changing the attainment targets to not be the teacher interacting with the content and the students, but the teachers designing opportunities for students to interact in that content through a variety of modalities.
Okay, thank you so much, Jill. Now, this is a very interesting question. In fact, there are 3 concepts in the same question, right? So let me just, try to explain it. what strategies can we use to assure interactive participation in the lesson? All right, so that is one is about participation. The second part of the question is about monopolizing the discussion. So some active students tend to, speak more or are more active than others. So that is the second part of the question. And that also actually talks about classroom management, because teachers, in virtual learning are worried about classroom management. And because I'm working with professional development and the Beacon House Schooling Uninterrupted. So there are several, questions by our teachers about classroom management. So that is another part. And lastly, how do you cater to differentiation in a classroom, which is virtual, because you don't want to leave any student behind. So there are three concepts in this one question. If you would like to take them one by one, please.
So I definitely want to take them one by one. I'll just say that as Amber and I have been working the last couple of days, we have a bear outside of our house. So my dogs were barking as the bear is walking by. I wish I could take you all and show you this baby bear. He's amazing. If you'll just,
as long as it's just walking by, it's fine. It doesn't come into the camera. It's okay. Yeah,
then we're good to go. So if you'll just go through that first question for me again, then we'll get to the other two.
Yeah, the first one is about encouraging children to participate and engaging them, in the activities that you have online. How to ensure maximum participation.
Absolutely. And we know it's very different from being in the brick and mortar experience. The click and online experience means I have students who I'm not in control of the built environment around them. So I can't reduce the sensory stimuli to promote that sensory cognition for students. So for us, it's really designing as educators authentic and relevant formative assessments and experiences that include students. And so part of that is co-creating what that learning experience looks like with students. If you want them to remain active in the process, you have to invite them in the process. And we know that through micro interactions and multiple collaborative opportunities, if students are consistently producing in a way that's about how they feel, it's not about here's the fact, regurgitate it, but it's being able to apply that to something real in a relevant way, then we as teachers in this virtual experience have the opportunity then to create differentiated moments. So there are times in my online workshops where, say, I have 40 people in a workshop. I'm going to say, all right, this small group goes into a breakout room. This other small group is going to go into a breakout room, but they're all going to turn their video off and they're going to do a reflection on the Miro board. And then I, as the teacher, have the opportunity to move around those different breakout rooms to differentiate. And in some cases, I can do random breakout rooms based on what's happening or the learning modality that I've chosen. But I also have the opportunity as an instructor, the same way I would set up my physical environment, to do mini workshops, to do mini direct instruction to support students who maybe have naive misconceptions, maybe have a clear misunderstanding of something that's going on, or maybe just need to start over because they are completely out in left field because they didn't engage in the previous class. So part of that is learners designing their own experiences, creating portfolios of work that really showcase their own thinking and highlight them, because that kind of agency invites them back into the process. But when students are passive and they know that their teacher's not engaging, or they're not working with their peers, or they're not supported to work with their peers through relationships and norms and protocols, it's really easy for students and for adults to check out of a learning environment situation. And I can tell you, I'm guilty of all of a sudden my phone is buzzing and going off, and it's easy for me to look down. I was in a meeting where somebody thought they turned off their video camera and decided to change their clothes And we were all like, whoa, turn off your video, you know? And another time where a student was eating cereal and the student's mom came in and accidentally spilled the food all over the student. So we have to create and understand that our built environment in a virtual experience has to be established through community and culture and norms that invite the students in to co-create and produce work. Otherwise, it's very easy for us to get completely distracted and check out based on our own physical environment. Sorry, my enthusiasm overrides my judgment. I hope I didn't take too long on that question, but I love this work. I think it's very fascinating.
No, thank you, Jill. That was very, very useful. So a lot of people are interested in the tool. Again, I will ask a question about the tool. There is a question that by what age do you recommend use of the Miro board and without parental involvement and intervention?
Sure. I've done it as early as kindergarten, but with a lot of training. So we might spend in the very first session 5 minutes in Miro where students just log in and play with the tools. And then we aren't going to use it again. And then we'll move right into story time. Or in one of our kindergarten classes, we're doing a block challenge where students are actually using shapes in their own home to build one structure that connects between each other. And so then we might go back to the Miro board and create a collaborative experience there where I'm sharing on my screen. And so the Miro board can start as early as kindergarten. It's the ways in which we set up the experience with the Miro board that allows them to come in and play and to get established. If we jump right into content and we don't allow for play and for exploration, then we've missed a key moment for learning. We've missed that key moment. And so many times when we use any sort of tool, we have to embed just the playtime with the tool and then establishing clear norms. And then by being repetitive with those norms and slowly getting deeper into any tool that you select, you're going to build the confidence and skill sets with your students. So scaffolding at a younger age, but we are surprised. My 9-year-old and 12-year-old are the ones who came in and set up this Miro board. They designed what it should look like. They did the arrows to help people visually think. So I have to wonder if our digital natives who've been around technology since birth, it's not as much of a challenge for them. They don't experience as much fear. The fear comes from, or the challenge comes from, the expectation as a teacher is there's no missed instructional moment. Every instructional minute counts. So that exploration with technology tools has this really bad reputation of being play, which is not learning. So I think we have to shift our own mindset that play and exploration is part of the learning. It invites students in to teach us how to impact them in a better way. And that's co-creation of learning environments. And as teachers, we weren't taught to do that. And so for many of us, it's a new learning experience. So I think that we have to play and we have to take risks. I mean, Amber, you and I were there the other day. We were like, how is this going to work when we have people on Miro and there's only 100 users, and then we're going to have people who are listening in? But we took a risk and did something in a global environment that we didn't know if it was going to work. And did we have technical difficulties? Absolutely. But we're growing from that, and we're creating skill-based experiences that allow students to dig deeper into the process because we've engaged in interactions. And that directly impacts the relationship between memory and cognition. And that's our goal as educators, is to really inspire and stimulate students to want to dig deeper into different areas. And so we aren't always going to inspire kids to say, love history or love science, but we can create an experience that's challenging enough for them that we want kids, whether it's online or in person, to be provided with challenges from teachers that make them go, huh? What does she want me to do? Do you get it? Because those questions are how we launch students into the inquiry process, because simmering in ambiguity is what creates high quality problem solvers. So it's not about creating an objective. And I do this as the teacher. We do this, so you do it exactly like me, and then you go do it on your own. Virtual learning and student-centered learning means we flip that model up and on its head. And we put students in challenging experiences where they have to figure out what they need to know. And then we as teachers are there to support them through micro interactions, through agentic product development, and the creation of these environments, both virtually and in the built space, that promote inquiry. And I think that really, that part of teaching doesn't change. And that's where the art and science of teaching is part of all of your teachers that I've met. Every Beacon House teacher I've met has said, how do I get better to make sure that my students are getting what they need? And I haven't met a teacher who isn't focused on ensuring that students have the opportunities to better themselves through the learning process.
Yeah, thank you, Jill. Actually, as Dr. Tony Wright says, that talk is the fuel of professional development. And I think that goes for, all of us, be it adults or, younger children. As teachers, we should just let go and, learn to learn with our learners. Sometimes when during an observation, when I'm with teachers and they're giving instructions about technology to children, it sounds as if they're, trying to explain that technology to themselves actually, because children already know most of it, So we have to let go and become co-creators. That's a very, very powerful notion. There is a question from some school leaders now, that earlier on school leaders and subject coordinators were able to evaluate teachers by classroom, through classroom observations and copy checking and, looking at their lesson plans. So, and looking at the assessment results. So how do you propose, for leaders to supervise and facilitate and, gather data about the learning that is going on in their schools now, and at the same time empower teachers now in this, virtual environment?
Absolutely. It's a great question. So as part of my work with schools right now is being able to observe and develop learning environments that are student-centered. And so using tools like Miro board and having students design and teachers design their instruction within that Miro board means that teachers can unit plan inside the Miro board, and administrators can be part of that planning process. And then students can also observe that planning process, but the Miro board's large enough that then the teachers can create that project or that unit of instruction or lesson still within that Miro board. There's a video option in the Miro tool that we're using, as well as multiple other tools where school leaders can be also invited into the process to watch and experience what's happening. So as leaders, we have to shift that mindset that we're invited into this process. And observation might mean I'm working with small groups of students. I'm also engaged in the types of products and responding to the types of products that teachers are giving, because then we can provide growth producing feedback in real time with a Post-it note, just like our students would in a tool like Miro. And so when I go in and observe teachers, I will leave growth producing feedback, action steps that are simple that they can make right away that will impact. And then when I go to have a conversation with a teacher later via video, we can use that Miro board as a way to engage in dialogue and conversation about how that teacher wants to grow and change based on that kind of experience. So great question.
Thank you so much, Jill. It has been an amazing session and a very, very enlightening session indeed. You've touched upon, differentiation, classroom management, the role of the school leader in the classroom. It has been absolutely amazing. And, how students are actually producers in the classroom and not just consumers of information. The Miro tool, I think, is actually going to open so many new avenues of deeper learning in the classroom for students as well as teachers. I'm sure I will use it in my own professional development sessions as well. Thank you, Jill. It's always a pleasure to have you on board. Please, viewers, give your feedback on our website live.sotevents.com. It will just take a click of a button. It's the link is the button is right in front of you. It helps us improve as we conduct these SOT conferences. Then also, last but definitely not the least, I would like to thank our lead conference sponsor, United Bank Limited, and it is actually because of these corporate sponsors and their generous support that we are actually able to conduct these conferences. Ladies and gentlemen, I also want you to log in to other sessions. We still have the conference going on till tomorrow, and we hope you will be attending more sessions and joining us in our quest to explore the new normal that we will be experiencing. Thank you so much. Thank you, Jill. Stay safe.
Thank you.
Bye.